Your attention, please. Kindly take a moment to locate your nearest fire exit. In the unlikely event of an evacuation, please follow the directions of the CCD staff and proceed directly outside. Please do not attempt to re-enter the building unless told that it is safe to do so. Thank you.
Read a note taker, do we? So this is TSVWG. The chairs are getting slides. It's Friday morning. Things might start a little slow, but our intention is to get through our agenda today. We've got a number of documents on that agenda, but we will make no progress without a note taker. Do we have author of a note taker for this session, please? Whoa, the man in the middle wins the prize. Thank you ever so much.
And we return to the grand auditorium.
We do, the large stage with the big lights. So, I'm Gori Fairhurst, yet again, and this is?
I'm Martin. Hello.
This is the TSVWG session, session 2 or session 3, depending on how you count. So a comment on that, we did an agenda shuffle to get an extra slot on Tuesday, so we will not be running for 1 hour in this session. We will not be running for 2 hours. We will be stopping after 1 hour. So please stick with us for the hour. This is the meeting tips. If you haven't worked out how to do it, please use the on-site tools so you can join the queue. We have time for questions this morning. We'd love questions. And we also want to make sure we get a sensible size room for the next meeting. The IETF note well applies, and our agenda for this morning looks like this. We have 3 drafts we're going to talk about. One is a quick heads up in the chair's session, just to announce a draft exists, and then 2 drafts which we're hoping you have read. Martin Jukes, UDP ECN, and Med's going to be working with John on requirements for host network collaboration signaling. Does anybody have anything else that they feel we should be covering or any agenda items to bash? So we'll start with Mohit giving a quick heads up on a draft that's just been submitted. Use either set of mics.
Hello, good morning. I'm Mohit from NITK, and just wanted to mention that I have submitted a draft on FlowQPy, which is a hybrid packet scheduler and active queue management algorithm. Next slide. So in a nutshell, this algorithm combines flow queuing, that's what it stands for, FQ, with the Pi algorithm. FQ part is pretty much similar to what we have done in RFC 8290 on FQ Codel. And the pi part is pretty much similar to what we have already in 8033. However, with a small change that our algorithm recommends using timestamps to calculate the Q delay instead of the DQ rate estimator, and the reasons for that have been stated in the internet draft. We already have 2 implementations of FQPy. One is in the Linux kernel since March 2020, version 5.6, and also in Network Simulator 3 from NS3 2021 version. Your feedback is very valuable. The link is in the slides for this draft. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. And I'll be around to talk about this if you want. Thank you.
And for those of you who remember the deep distant past, we had an AQM working group, and that was one of the items that that group didn't look at the time. So it'd be interesting to see feedback from people as to whether there's appetite for doing this combination of the Pi scheduler with FQ. Do that on the mailing list, please. And the first talk in the agenda is configuring sockets for ECN for UDP. Is Martin here? Ooh. Poor Martin, he's
I guess we'll switch those around.
Will we? Yeah, let's.
Is he there?
There's Martin. We just asked if you were here. And... So this is Martin. This draft is currently individual, and it's been around for a little while, so I'm hoping that people will have read it, which is a clue. If you haven't yet read it, please look at it. It's quite short, in fact, very short, and you may be able to read it even during the time that Martin talks. Go ahead, Martin.
I apologize, the trains here are unreliable, so I'm just at the last moment. So, hi, I'm Martin Duke. I work at Google. As many of you may know, I've been spending a fair amount of the past year trying to get ECN working in Chrome, which necessarily has involved messing with UDP socket APIs on a variety of platforms, specifically Linux, Apple, and Microsoft. And the experience was unsatisfactory. Next slide. So I'm not going to read the chart to you. It's only a 6-page document, as Gori said. And I've summarized at least the received side of this in the table. But broadly speaking, the takeaway from this is that all 3 platforms are different in just how they sort of spell these options. They make different assumptions about what the operations you need to do, particularly for dual stack sockets, which is a whole thing where like some require you to set both the V4 and the V6, and others just have you set the V6 and V4 is an error. And there might be, well, there's some things that I suspect are bugs, but without much documentation, it's hard to say whether or not that was the intended behavior. And in general, the documentation is quite poor. So next slide. So this is my last slide. It's just the send side of that. My intent in writing this was just, I had such a bad time figuring out this through trial and error and trying to find documentation online, and eventually just emailing people I knew at Apple and Microsoft to fill in some of the blanks, that I just wanted to write down something and put it on the internet in a way that might be accessible via search for other people to not to suffer through what I did. So I made an internet draft. I thought it was a good plan, and just trying it out on Google search, it seems to have worked in that regard. As it turns out, this got a pretty strong positive reaction on the list. A number of people, thank you, Max and Michael Tuxen in particular, have invested a fair amount of effort in trying to make it a better document. It's an informational draft, as you might imagine. And so that made me think that maybe the group would want this as an RFC. So I have a few questions of the group. Number one, is this something you would like to consider for adoption? I'm happy to take it through. There are a few question marks here, by the way, because there's some things I didn't have to explore in my trial and error. So there's some things there's some holes we'd have to fill in to do this document. Also, those of you, the other thing I'd like to ask of the group is those of you that have access to the Apple and Microsoft source codes, would very much appreciate someone looking at that code, making sure that my findings are correct, and helping to fill in some of these holes. And certainly, if anything does happen to be a bug and you have the intent to fix it, I'm happy to write that down. This is not an attempt to pass a value judgment on anything. It's just to document what is going on. So if the current if the current behavior is X and you want in the future the current behavior to be Y, I'm happy to record that for posterity. And that's really it. I don't know if people want to respond at the mic or just read it, or if the editors want to do an adoption call or what.
I mean, I presume, Martin, if the...
Oh, there's tons of people in the queue, sorry.
Yeah, there's a queue building. I mean, I presume, Martin, if the intended thing is a bug and they actually think that Y should be the right thing and put it into the source code, then we just document Y. I mean, because, what are the usefulness of having a document which describes different implementations might be that they actually see, well, we'll do a common approach in future.
That would be great. Obviously, okay, so the nice thing about UDP ECN is it's been a minority pursuit up to now.
Yes.
Quick is obviously not that old. SCTP over DTLS has existed forever, but I don't think that anyone has implemented ECN for that. And I guess there's ECN over RTP over UDP, which I'm aware of one research implementation, and I heard Sunday that someone else might be doing another one for WebRTC. But again, minority pursuit. If all the operating system people want to get together and have a common approach, that would be awesome. And probably the costs would be low for now to the community, but that may change in the future.
So now we have an enormous queue of people wanting to ask you lovely questions.
All right.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Yeah.
Yes. I was able to read this morning, and I noticed that the BSD platforms are not listed. Presumably you didn't encounter those while developing Chrome. So I happen to know someone who would be able to advise you on how BSD works in that respect.
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. So maybe the chart I put up did not say BSD, but the document says BSD, and that's largely thanks to Michael Tuxen. As it turns out, well, if I understand correctly, the Apple stack is based off BSD, and they're as far as I can tell, there's no difference between the two of them and how they handle all this stuff, with the exception that Apple has the network framework layer on top of it, which is not really the subject of this document. And that's, frankly, one of the reasons I think the documentation is a little more sparse than it might otherwise be, because I think they encourage people to use network framework. Stuart can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, while reading the document, I didn't see any mention of BSD, only of Apple.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You're not looking at the editor's copy. Yes. I think in the last draft I published, I did not have the words, but we've made that fix. Oh, it's on the slide. How about that? Okay. Yes. So it's a good observation. Thanks to Michael, it's already been fixed. Thank you, Jonathan. And I will definitely take eyes on the BSD/Apple bits to the extent you're willing to provide it. Thank you. Stuart.
Stuart Cheshire from Apple. Thank you for doing this. It might seem like a relatively simple thing, but I think the impact is enormous, and the act of publishing it as a draft focuses attention on it better than I know you've been sending around emails asking for input. I will make sure the relevant people at Apple review this. We should fill in the blanks. We should make it consistent. I would suggest that you add a column for the network framework APIs, because, for instance, on the Apple Watch, BSD sockets is not available.
Oh, so, wow. Okay.
There are a number of reasons we believe network framework is a better API for networking in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. So, and I need to check with that team to make sure they expose ECN, because I don't know whether they do. So thank you for raising this issue.
Yes, thank you, Stuart. So this document is very much the product of the work path I needed to follow, and the Chrome code base does not use network framework, and so I just didn't explore that. But I'd be ecstatic to add that information. I will say that Windows has something else, a different abstraction layer on top of sockets. it's a little closer to the socket, but not. And I did get to mess with that a little bit, and that was an interesting experience as well. Just put it that way. Lars.
Yeah, Lars Eckert, I'm going to talk you through it after about why we can't use network framework, but we'll do that offline. So a few reactions. So one is in theory, Apple and BSD are the same. In practice, they have been different in the past because there have been bugs around this, and they got fixed. That sort of makes me wonder whether the draft is great. And a corollary to the draft would be running GitHub CI to make sure this doesn't change, because the operating systems are changing, right? To make sure that what we're saying is actually correct. And you have it in a GitHub repository, so having a few test cases that can include the BSDs, because you can do VM-based BSD CI in GitHub. I think that would be sort of a helpful service, or just a reminder that we don't need to do a BIS version because something broke. As a takeaway for extra credit, maybe there's a student that wants to help you or something. Or maybe you have code, I don't know. Maybe.
I absolutely do not. I mean, so Chrome has a fairly robust cross-platform test infrastructure, which is how I find all these problems, or at least some of these problems. I will gleefully take a contribution to my repo.
Right. If you have a signal that lets you know when the content of the draft is no longer accurate, and work off that for future BIS, that would also work. Because this is a snapshot in time, and these things have changed, right?
Yes.
And for example, my next ask, or it's a little bit sort of out there, but now do TTL. No, because so I for giggles, right? Because I did ECN like a while ago. And I've been sort of noodling around with an idea whether a quick stack should look at a path TTL change as maybe an indication of the path has changed, and I should do validation or congestion control reaction or something, right? And so I try to get the TTL out of the packets. And there's also all kinds of sort of differences. And there, as far as I know, Apple still has a bug where if you do the BSD dance of the socket options, you don't actually get the TTL out on Apple, you do on BSD. So there's other ancillary data related things in the stacks that are all very different and also undocumented.
Certainly, yeah, the socket differences are a theme. I am personally not going to do that investigation. If someone wants to just send me a big blob of text about TTL, I'll take it, or we could do it in a different draft. That's, I mean,
I'm not 100% serious. I'm just saying this is the important bit, but there's other things around the auxiliary data API that are really not super.
I think what's a little bit unique about ECN is all of a sudden there's a bunch of interest in this particular set UDP socket options, and it's just like I thought.
No, and this is a great draft, and we should absolutely not publish this. So no question about it.
Okay.
Thank you for doing the work.
Martin, the other Martin.
Yes, speaking as an individual who has implemented ECN in a quick stack, this has been a painful exercise. So this is would have been very much welcome when I did that work. I don't see any mention of the contents of the control message in your draft, because what I ran into is that some platforms require an integer, like a 4-byte integer, and some require a 1-byte integer.
I did not stumble into that problem in my trial and error. What I did worked. That doesn't mean that other choices would have failed. So that is another degree of freedom that we could.
Yeah, we can work this out. Old Linux kernels want something different than new Linux kernels, which is the same as everybody else wants, which is a 4-byte.
Yeah. That's why I disabled ECN on old kernels altogether.
So this is on my personal GitHub. Again, I feel like there might be interest in adopting this, in which case it moves to the TSVWG GitHub. And so, do we want to? Okay, let's just get to the queue.
I have a second question.
Yes.
For implementing a quick stack, the don't fragment bit is also pretty important. And I ran into similar but different pain points there. Are there any plans to either extend this document or write a follow-up separate document for the DF bit?
No, I did not have the intent of writing the sock ops manual for all. I had a narrow problem with a specific thing, that a particular set of socket options that nobody cared about until like 2 years ago, that that now everyone is experiencing pain. Like, I mean, I think there's some, like, I think like the dual stack in particular is probably like a theme. I would guess, without having confirmed, that like Apple in general, like if it's a dual stack socket, you set the IPv6 option that covers both 4 and 6, whereas the other stacks are not doing that. So that is probably not just an ECN thing, but I haven't confirmed anything.
Unfortunately, it works slightly different for DF.
Okay,
But
great.
yeah, that's
That's what, of course,
part of the pain point.
Yeah.
Just a minute. Fun as this is, and lover of fragmentation solving things, it's really a separate topic. So if this draft is going to be a useful document, it needs to focus on just one thing. It's solved in many ways, hopefully solved finally in one way. And I think that's a more useful context than saying, let's solve everything that needs to be done. Although other things could start capturing other things that need to be done. That would be a useful activity as a separate thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am not like, I'm not going to die on the hill of refusing PRs that like document other sock hops, but it's up to the working group whether they prefer that in a separate document or not. I don't really care, and I do think it's a little neater to have a small document that explains this problem that people can search. People will search UDP socket ECN, and hopefully this will come up. Because that didn't come up for me, and that's why I had such a horrible time. Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning from Garland, Texas. Thank you for doing this. I want to observe that adoption provides an opportunity to improve the chances of ECN being more deployable along with Quick. That ignoring the situation or publishing the draft as an RC now does not. And I want to agree on with Gory. I think he's headed towards this could be the first of several helpful documents that the working group produces that would make the internet a better place without relying only on Martin Duke to do the work.
Well, yeah, I think relying on me is a path to failure because I'm pretty much done after this one. I'm sorry, Spencer, you said something about publishing an RFC would not help. So
I'm saying publishing your observations now would not be as helpful as giving the working group a chance to chew on it first. And thank you for asking asking me to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Spencer.
It's worth also me saying that for years, including this week, every time we see a proposal or every time we do a proposal for some possible improvements to performance that don't include ECN, somebody says, but why don't you just use ECN, or how does this work with ECN? And if we get serious about making ECN easier to use, or at least understanding the issues using ECN in practice for application developers, that's going to be a whole lot better, thing than just talking about if people could use ECN, how much better the situation would be. Every time we have a new proposal, I give you Scone as the most recent one, but I mean it goes all the way back as farther than I do, I think.
Thanks, Spencer. Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm not here to say anything useful, just to complain, which is to say, not about you, but about our backend servers are implemented on the top of the Java VM, and Java has no APIs at all, as far as I can tell, to get ECN. So if anybody knows anybody who works at OpenJDK or Oracle, hit them with a hammer, please. I filed an issue on them a while ago, and nothing happened with it.
Okay, and if something happens incredibly quickly, I'm happy to take that into this draft as well. Michael?
Michael Tuxon.
I second what Martin says. Put in a description of the type of the C message you get. I think it's basically for the T class, it's an int, and for the TOS byte, it's a byte. Another comment is you mentioned you had the impression that for some platforms there are bugs. Can you spell out in the draft explicitly, I think this is a bug, or let the people know, because then they can double check and say, no, this is intended, or yes, this is a bug, we'll fix it?
I mean,
Or contact the people. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I've sent some email. I mean, I'm a little reluctant to just like guess in an informational draft. I'd rather just document the behavior, and if people think that's right, that's great. But I mean, at the risk, I hate. Go ahead.
If after this list we decide to adopt, so the first thing I'm going to ask is who has read. So if you're still wondering what this is, please read it. It becomes a work item, and at that point, I think we have a second chance to go around and ask developers saying, look, we've got this strange behavior here. We either document it and say it's weird, or we say, oh, you're going to accept a patch or a pull request, and this is going to change in future. And I think that would be a really good exercise to do before we get to a working group last call to publish.
Yeah,
does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, please let developers know that you think
Yes,
that
exactly.
there is a bug or might be a bug, then they can double check.
Okay, I think that drains the queue.
And then the first
We're
question.
going to run a show of hands.
Oh, am I doing it?
Was the other one?
Am I doing the call? We have conflicting calls. You press yours. We can only do one at a time.
So
Please click if you've read 01 or 02, because the draft will have a 03 soon. But if you've read either of these, so you know the content, please vote and say you have. Well, you didn't bring a device to vote.
No, I mean, I came in here a little hot. If you've forgotten.
That's a lot of people.
So we're looking for a sense that people have read, and we see currently a reasonable number of people have seen this, which is good because Martin asserted it had been discussed on the list. Right. We shall report that 21 people said yes, they have read. We note that 14 said no. Hopefully people will have a look at that if you can. But 21 people saying yes indicates we have a number of people in this room who can make an opinion about this document. So we're going to ask the next question. And my co-chair is typing it, so I shall wait till he types it.
The question is, should the working group work on this document?
Strictly on this topic, but yes.
Okay, I will change this.
So the topic, the scope of what we've been speaking about today and the content of that draft, is this a suitable topic where you feel we should be doing work as an informational?
That is a very clear yes.
Conclusion.
38 yes votes, 3 no opinions, no votes against this.
Jonathan, did you have a clarifying question?
No, just noting that it was absolutely shooting up.
Yes. Even people who haven't read it understand this problem and would like to see work on it. So I think the chairs can conclude there is a clear appreciation of the value of publishing an informational document in this area. We could actually ask if people are willing to adopt this. As a sense of the room, we will do this via the list formally, but I think we have seen a fairly clear indication that many people have read this and people feel this is a useful basis for doing this work. So we'll do a show of hands if you would like to see the working group adopt it. For information, we're only doing this for information, we'll confirm on the list, but we'll actually do that call today.
While people are voting, Martin, if we move it to TSVWG repo, do the issues come with it?
They do.
Okay, great. So those of you who have made wonderful comments about what's missing from the draft, et cetera, like please file issues. There's a link to the current repo in the draft, and obviously it'll assuming that the adoption moves forward, we'll move to the TSVWG repo. But as Martin just said, there's no reason to wait. So thank you.
Okay, that is 27 yes votes and 3 no opinions and no objections.
Okay, we'll confirm that on the list, and when we confirm the list, we'll also hope that if you think we should adopt it, that you'll please review this document as it progresses. There's obviously some work to do because Martin's done a lot of work today, but if we're going to get the details of different operating systems checked and possibly changed as a result of this work, we need a group of people to form a community around the document. So please read, please help, please contribute, and we'll check on the list. Any final comments, Martin?
Yeah, just as an addendum, as I said, I was working on this for Chrome. So many of you know I'm a quick guy. So for quick Chrome now, ACK-ECN is now in an experiment in Chrome stable, which means that barring some sort of terrible piece of data that we see, I would expect that on the order of a small number of months, like it should be on by default in Chrome. So those of you who are like chomping at the bit to do quick ECN servers, like there will be clients that can respond. Well, I know that iOS is probably ahead of us in this regard, but most clients should be able to support you in fairly short order. So I'm pretty excited to announce that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you for rushing to the stage. The next topic has been discussed at several working groups in the past with various proposals. I'm pleased that the editors of this individual draft have come back and changed each time and reframed. So this is a reframing of the requirements for host to network collaboration signal. John, you're going to speak on behalf of the group. Med, are you here as well? Okay, if you want to come and also help answer the questions, that's fine. But go ahead, John, present your slides.
So these are the requirements for the host to network collaboration signaling. So we've revised it to say host to network to indicate that it is a client to network or a server to network. And these are just the requirements for those two sets of interactions. The next page, please. So why per packet metadata? And let me just go through the figure to say that this is looking at bottlenecks in the network, temporary bottlenecks that result from varying levels of bandwidth or extra congestion. And there could be more and more of those in the network temporarily. So we have two sets of problems. One is from the congestion control side of things. They work in the order of RTTs, multiple RTTs, whereas what this draft is looking at is the changes that occur in very short time frames and an opportunity for the network to prioritize or handle those packets in such a way as to improve the quality of experience for the client. And the other end of the things is that the server itself may take time to respond. So essentially, we're looking at not affecting the congestion control algorithms, which settle to a very stable, conservative rate, but rather to influence or allow the network to improve the quality of service if the flow is able to send at a higher rate, but also tolerate some loss of packets. But at the end, we want better quality of service. Some of the research that we've looked at does give a better quality of service for these kinds of flows. So it's complementary to the congestion control algorithms and L4S. And the idea is that the per packet differentiation can improve quality of service for these network conditions. Already in RTP, we could use an implicit signal, which is the payload type. But that's probably not the right approach with recommendations in RFC 9419. It's better to use an explicit signal. And also, there may be different requirements in terms of whether it's audio or video. Some flows may want to prioritize audio, whereas in other cases, you may want to prioritize video. And just having a payload type does not give the network these options. So these are the kinds of scenarios that we're looking at. The next page. So the question is who benefits from it? Basically, it's the flows with the unreliable transport, so unreliable quick or RTP. And, different kinds of servers we've looked at, I mean, from CDN or peer-to-peer, wireless networks, or otherwise small content providers. The users get to have improved performance during both the network hiccups, um, or to prioritize one set of flows over another within that UDP. Or in the case of networks, it enhances the efficiency by essentially allowing rate limiting to work more effectively. Rather than drop random packets, it could be packets of low priority that are dropped only, and those are the benefits. So it's pretty broad. The next page. So we looked at in terms of trade-offs and constructed a very basic slide to look at per packet versus per flow and per session. And you look at that, I mean, per session is a very coarse signal that's rather infrequent at the beginning or middle or the end of the session, whereas per flow is conveyed for all packets of the flow, such as evaluating the rate and per flow, and per packet we apply the signal to every packet of the flow, and it's a simple signal of whether it's higher or lower priority or delay tolerance. So just going through the other things in terms of the differences, I mean, the signaling frequency is rather low with the session, whereas in a per flow kind of signal, we're looking at estimating rate over a few RTTs, whereas this signal frequency is not reactive. It's rather to indicate to the network to handle it sort of proactively. So it's per packet. And the other difference looking at per flow and per packet would be that the sender reacts to changes in the order of a few RTTs, whereas in per packet, the network reacts to the changes in the network and it can apply these instantaneously and not wait for feedback. So the next page. So this is a model of the requirements. I mean, we have server to network requirements, client to network, and a few API and system requirements. Based on the comments from the group, we have taken away almost 70% of the requirements. These are just the very few requirements on that hopefully we have consensus on. So on the server to network side, there's packet priority, which indicates that a packet has a higher or lower priority and is an indication to the network to forward it, or in case of congestion, drop it, and that's the indication there. The packet delay or a requirement packet is tolerance to delay indicates whether the shaper can hold on a little bit and before forwarding. Client to network, there are two requirements. One on what protocol may be used to transport or what the system should look for. Since these are requirements, these are left very broad at this point. It could be DSCP or an IP flow label, UDP options, or ICMP or anything. I mean, that's up to the solution phase. At this point, it's left broadly open and for the can be decided on in the solution phase. And the other one in the client to network is the requirement that the client can decide in some cases on, for example, the audio or video. In some cases, you may have a preference for audio being high priority versus video, or the other way around. And there are just a few requirements on the API and the system, which are listed there. I can quickly go over that. I mean, API is just what we covered. I mean, an API that may be for indicating whether it's via flow labels or UDP options or ICMP or whichever else that the network should look for. Privacy, by privacy, the main points are that it should not disclose any additional information about the flow via traffic analysis or any other means. Also, yeah, those are the requirements on the API and the system side. That's pretty much it. When we on the next page, we have a list of all the feedback that we have received from the group and what we've addressed. So this is a highly shortened and simplified version of the document. As I mentioned, we've taken away, as the group has requested, anything that is not basically required. We've looked at research to show that the quality of service does improve with the rate and per packet metadata referenced in here. And there's more than one actually. So we don't see a downside to it either in the research because it just defaults down to the rate that would otherwise happen if this signal is ignored. We've added metadata obfuscation as Tom had discussed on the list. Clarified that this is complementing L4S and other reactive signals. This is Marcus's, and the IP fix does not really apply in this draft, so we've not clarified that. We've added the clarification on 9419 about using implicit versus the explicit signals. And also draft Herbert host network signaling has a whole list of trade-offs when you use these different techniques. And so that's also clarified in there. So next page, please. So, in the past, we've got positive feedback. At least 26 people said that they were interested in IETF 119. And I think we've addressed a whole lot of comments that we've received from the group, and we're looking to see what the group thinks of adopting it as a basis to go forward.
Okay, thank you, John. So we'll take questions, and we'll also ask later in the session if people have read a recent version, by which we mean 03 or 04, because there's been substantial differences in the publication of 03. But before we do that, let's build a set of people at the mic. If you have questions, please ask.
Hi, Marcus Hiller. This is more a clarification question. You talk about per packet priority. Are you, maybe I should have read more carefully in the document, but are you considering priority? Are you expecting that the scheduler or AQM that actually applies the priority is aware, like has some level of flow awareness, or are you just seeing this across flows? Because I think it makes a very big difference on whether you like you can game this very easily if this is applied across flows, as if it's more like within a session or a flow.
Yeah, I think this is exactly, I would say this is a good question, and we insisted on this one on the document, is that this is really within the same flow.
Okay.
That means that it's not because we are using this metadata that you will grab or have more resources. It's just the way your packets that are within the flow can be handled better to accommodate, I would say, the requirements from the client or for the server. That means that the quality of service overall will be applied for per flow, but then it's up to you to have some, I would say, differentiation within that flow itself.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more question. Have you, so you're talking about, for instance, prioritizing audio over video. Have you considered the capabilities of the endpoints doing these prioritizations themselves and like downgrading the video and then comparing that to having this priorities in the network?
Yeah, actually we have the two ways. The first one is that the server decide, but sometimes the server does not know about the preferences of the customer itself. If, for example, people with some disabilities and so on, they may have preference for video rather than audio, or the other way around. If you, for example, watching a football game and so on, you don't care about the audio itself. Right. What you care is the video. So that's what we captured with the requirement client decide. Okay. But then it's up to the I would say the preferences themselves, we don't impose them. It's up to the customer or the client to use them. But I think the idea here is to capture the main requirements. How this will be implemented is really another step that we hope to do in the working group.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Rüdiger Geib, Deutsche Telekom. I have read the draft and also one of the publications you refer to. My question is, I'm not clear about that, whether the draft actually is on packet-based scheduling or on what that one octopus called flow-based scheduling. I'd appreciate if you try to avoid stateful schedulers and do things per packet and not per flow, because I have a recollection that the ATM guys tried to do that, handle IP packets based on ATM cells, and they failed. I think that would be better if you avoid to go to that pitfall again. And the other point I wanted to make is you mention in the draft that flow control end-to-end is based on transport, but you do not show in detail what you mean by that. And I'd like to understand that too. If you drop a bigger number of packets because it's no longer, these packets are no longer required by the terminal, how does the end-to-end congestion control, how is it made aware of that fact that nothing has changed? Thanks.
There were a number of questions in there. I'll try to take the first one on the, when the schedulers in the research paper, that is a work that was done on a wireless network, and they do deal with flows. So essentially, if I understand, they were using two levels of flows in there. One that is of guaranteed bit rate, and the other priority, which is not guaranteed. So I understand what you're saying. I mean, they were looking at whole frames or dropping whole frames, but this is just one of the research. I mean, we've worked internally on that. We have not published yet, but I can say that we've looked at it per packet, and we do get improvements without any state on them. We will soon let you know about that. And the second question, I'm sorry, I didn't follow fully. Could you?
The draft, and I also think in Scone they say, well, the end-to-end congestion control, that is standard transport. And then they go away and leave the readers with this information. I do not fully understand how this works, and I'd like to understand it.
Perhaps you are in the wrong working group, so we have to go to Scone to ask that question. If I'm not mistaken.
No. I've been there and noted that they do the same thing as you do in this draft. You mentioned that the end-to-end congestion control is rather conservative and done by standard transports, and you do something which is orthogonal to it, but you drop packets. They are not ACT. How does this interwork? I'd like to understand it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, we want, okay, so I'm going to do a bit of framing, and then I'm going to invite Brian to come and talk about Scone as working group chair if he wishes. But the framing for this piece of work that we're discussing here from the chair's point of view is this an area where we can provide some guidance? It's informed by some people say that they have some work. This is not, at the moment, we're not discussing that piece of work and the building of a protocol. What we want to know is the minefield in which we're navigating. Where are the pitfalls? What have people said in the past about privacy, security, state, ability to implement these and deploy these protocols, so we can understand what this space looks like? And that's the piece I hope that the working group is thinking upon. So questions like Ingemar's are very relevant. Let's figure out where the problems are in this space and see if a document about these problems and which bits the IETF feels we have information about will be useful. Now, there is a position relative to SCON, and I'm hoping that Brian says at least a little bit about this, because SCON is providing something in this space. Brian.
Do you want me to come up and do, because I actually came up to do something entirely different okay, so I'll inject myself real quick and talk about SCON very, very quickly. So in having discussions after the working group yesterday, I have come to realize that naming a working group SCON that used to be on a list called SAD CDN, where one of the 3.5 things that we're talking about is also called SCON, is a recipe for confusion. So I will, with my chair hat on, talk about SCON, the working group, as of the end of the discussion yesterday. I think that work is probably complementary to what's here, because one of the basic assumptions of the SCON charter is that we're doing path to endpoint signaling as opposed to endpoint to path signaling. So all of this work is a completely flipped set of requirements. With that, I will remain in queue after Ingemar because I have something else to say about that, but that is with my chair hat off.
Thank you. Okay, back to Ingemar. If you're still in the queue, Ingemar, do you have another question?
Yeah, I've got a quick question, but perhaps comments, I believe, in regards to this, the thing that was brought up, and that you have a varying throughput in radio, and that it can be tricky to meet some kind of delay requirement. But I mean, 5G systems, you typically use a run-robin scheduling. That is the simplest one. But you have the option to use, for instance, quality of service flows. You can use, for instance, delay scheduling or least slack scheduling and things like that. So we can prioritize latency-sensitive loads. And another one that I read up on this Octopus paper that was referenced, and I've had a hard time to understand how you can keep so high throughput and still get a good quality. And I read and saw that they use scalable video coding, which costs some kind of encoding efficiency. It's not as efficient in coding like using just with one layer coding. Another one was a group of pictures in total was just 10 frames. And all that costs quite a lot in terms of coding efficiency. So if you gain something in throughput, you actually, the end-to-end quality is not much better than if you tune your congestion control to avoid those lower throughput occasions. So I sound like I'm a bit skeptical, but I believe one need to show more the benefit with all this in order to make this worthwhile, I say.
Ingmar, I can say what I understood out of the Octopus research. I mean, we looked at it in some detail, but we're not getting into solutions yet here. This is purely requirements. But to answer your question to some detail, what the Octopus paper is doing, in my understanding, is that they're using SVC obviously to send the media. They increase the rate to more than what, I mean, they're not using a feedback-based control. Rather, they're sending packets at a higher rate than what GCC or something else like that would settle into. And I believe that the loss rate increases from about 2% to 5%. But what they're dropping is lower priority frames. And as a result, what they see at the endpoint in terms of SSIM and PSNR is a significant improvement in quality because they're just dropping the lower priority and sometimes a whole GOP, actually. So this is what we've seen so far. We've done something slightly different, but we can get into that offline if you like.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Just one compliment to what John mentioned. I think that we really need to separate, I would say, the items. We are not claiming that you will get something that will be more powerful. We don't have any figure right now. Or what we are trying to figure out what we want to achieve in terms of, I would say, service and requirement. Can we give to the customer, for example, to control how the flows are being delivered to him? Can we provide some metadata to the network so that the network can do a better job so that the quality of the service and the quality of experience for the customer can be enhanced? I think that's only what we are trying here. The next steps, how we go into the much detail, this is really another discussion that we can have hopefully in the future.
Right.
Hi, me again. No hats. I've read most of the document just now. Right, like, so to get a flavor of like really, so you can put me down for one here. To get a flavor of what's really here. What I understand this to be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is we have sort of a broad list of, we have some requirements, we have a broad list of use cases, we've taken the use case of the requirements, but we have a basic assumption that is core to this document that the solution spaces are constrained to those in which the endpoints are giving semantic content to the network. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because so this is then like I don't want to say complementary. It has a weird relationship to sort of like the path-aware networking area, right? Because the path-aware networking research group was set up to look into mechanisms to solve the same types of problems with a fundamentally different base assumption, that being that the network signals to the endpoint, and the endpoint has some way that it can then use that data to affect routing, right? Like, so that is a more convoluted way to solve the same problems, but it's like sort of in the same space. I'm wondering the extent to which, like, that the framing of this, I understand that we need to cut things up so that we can make the problem tractable to think about. Like, we're not going to solve it using this. I'm not sure how useful it is to split that up, because that's like a fairly artificial way to look at things. It's like, we've decided that we're going to try and solve the problems with the network devices are going to, like, the flow of information is going to be from the edge toward the network devices about how that should work, right? We've had a lot of discussion about systems that work like this. I think Spencer, who is an author of this draft, wrote like a very, very extensive document in Panargy about that. I'm not going to tell Spencer to go read his own thing, obviously. So I'm assuming that in his contributions to this document, he has considered those. But it seems like we have like 2 or 3 different places where we're working to solve the same problem space, but we're making different fundamental assumptions that are exclusive in those spaces. And it's not clear to me that that's going to lead to convergence. So like, I have a little bit of, so there was an initial question up here about like still interest in per packet metadata. I'm super interested in this space. I'm not sure I'm interested pursuing a point solution to this problem space with those guardrails around it. Because there's one of the things that came out of the scone discussion yesterday, and this is like, no, not as chair, just something I observed while sitting up there, is one of the really deciding factors about what is going to be buildable and built there is how deployable is this, right? Like, I think, Ed, you and I just had this discussion out in the hallway, right? Like, the set of people that have to cooperate and consent in order to actually ship the thing needs to be smaller. And what we're doing sort of in the Panargy space, we called it a research group because it's like, that's got a much longer deployment story behind it, right? This doesn't seem to have a significantly shorter deployment story behind it. I don't have a solution here. I just have like a general discomfort with like making an assumption that this is how we're going to partition this problem space.
Is that assumption based upon the requirements and the privacy security considerations here? Or is it based on the fact we might produce a solution after we've done requirements?
I think it's based on the fact that we might produce a solution after we've done requirements where that solution makes a basic assumption that the flow of data needs to be exclusively edged toward the network. And then people will look at it and go, not interested. I mean, we've been having this discussion for 20 years, right? Like, so like, I don't want to blow this up. I'm just saying that like my enthusiasm for this is a little bit limited by the way that this box has been drawn. I'm not sure if I'm being
Well, the reason the box is drawn this way is because this is where the charter of TSVWG lies. We have maintained RSVP. We would have done ST2 in the past. We did Midcom. We've now do diffserv. Actually, diffserv being deployed takes a much bigger aggregate. And I guess the question here is, what happens if that aggregate would be less aggregated?
Less aggregated. Okay. Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes it like I understand that really clarifies the background. I think it's still kind of, I see that I have summoned Spencer, so I will sit down and stop talking now.
That's fine. Right, okay. We close the line, but we'll reopen for Spencer. While we're doing this, we're actually going to do a poll to try and parallelize things. The poll is simply, have you read the previous or current version of this document, just so we get a sense of where people are talking from. Go ahead, Lars.
Lars, I got Mozilla, so I'm trying to start constructive, and then I'm going to get up on my soapbox. But I'm going to try and stand down here. So I think the security considerations need significant work, right? So I think there's a requirement that says, that there must be no additional exposure. And then like you scroll down half a page and it says, oh, you should mark each iframe, right? And I'm pretty sure there's like old research that shows if you have the timing of iframes, you can identify the video, right? So you boom, you just blown through the encryption, right? And this step one up on the soapbox, right? This proposal is sort of a reaction of re-exposing information that we've successfully finally stuffed into a crypto envelope back into clear text, and it makes it much easier to identify content because there's now again much more metadata being exposed to observers, not just to the network, but like to anybody, right? And that requires some real deep security analysis, because even very few signals or very few bits of information about the metadata, especially packet-based metadata, it lets you do some significant analysis on what might be the content here. So that, I think the draft is really sort of not doing a good job here. In general, like there's sort of I'm sort of, there's a belief here that exposing more information to the operators will make them treat packets better, when I think in the reality we sort of we're trying, we the ends, right? Speaking as a browser vendor, are quite happy that the operators are like, it's encrypted and we send a packet and we kind of know nothing special will happen to it because an operator is sort of trying to help. And that's a much more predictable network scenario for us than having like operator boxes trying to help things where we don't quite know what they're actually doing. And it even gets worse if you signal things and one operator treats that this way and the operator thinks it's supposed to be treated that way, and then you have no predictability again. So I'm really quite skeptical about the usefulness of this work in general and the complexities that it needs. Thanks for letting me be up on the soapbox.
Yeah. I will start, I would say, with the first comment about the security. So this is not a working classical, this is just a document. It's not perfect.
So I think if we don't work here, we should start with the security.
Yeah, it is. I think we have at least, we can say that we have a decent discussion on the security aspect on the document. We cannot say that we have zero discussion on the security on the document. We clearly say that in order to consume the signal, we don't require to reveal the identity of the server itself. We don't know to reveal the identity of the applications. We don't need to know the type of the applications that are bound to a given flow. We are really very clear and explicit about this in the document. Then we don't say, nowhere in the document, that you must tag all your iframe. What we just say that perhaps there may be some important packets within the flow that only the customer or the application knows, that time to time it can tell to the, I would say, to the network, if you are under, I would say, reactive policy enforcement, that, for example, overload, and then you have to randomly drop the packets, please, if you can just let this go first rather than the others, it's just trying to help there. So there is no mandatory, I would say, requirement in terms of you have to set all the iframe like you have mentioned. The other point that you mentioned about, I would say, the collaborative. So I think that's a more, I would say, architectural approach, whether we think that we can gain more benefit if we have, I would say, the endpoint and the network collaborate in order to provide some benefit. I don't have an argument to convince you on it, because sometimes this is more, because this is just, there's no technical agreement on it. We can have, I would say it can be more philosophical rather than the other way around. So our approach is to say that if I have some visibility on when I enforce a policy in the network, rather than currently, which is really blind and random, it is likely that will behave better. That's the claim. Right now, it's a claim. And what we would like to do is that once we have some kind of requirements and people start to implement something, is to show the evidence whether this work or this broke. We don't know so far. I don't have any result to show you that if we implement all what we say here, that we'll have, I would say, what we expected. What we would like to do is to start with something which is really very scoped, implementable, and people can try to test and work with. That's only the, I would say, the format we're trying to do here.
Again, I think you really need to start with the security aspects, because it might well be that there will be very hard to overcome, and there won't be actually something that we can implement and deploy because the security aspects are bad. But I said my piece. I'll set it down. There's a long queue. Thank you.
I think maybe we take Lars's input as being one view from the end of some things that the working group will have to consider.
Mia Kulevind. So this was already said, but this is not a new thing. Like, this is an ongoing conversation for a very long time. So there's a lot of work around this. And my experience, and I've been very involved in this discussion for some time, is that I don't think it is very useful to talk about this in the abstract. Like, I think it's much more useful, and then like you can actually have the conversation that Lars wants to have, to talk about concrete proposals with a very concrete use case, rather than trying to cover the whole space and putting some abstract requirements up. And also, there is more places in the IETF that talk about these things. There are all the guidance documents from the IAB, which are in the abstract, but even more abstract, right? So, but they were trying to give some input to the conversation on a different level. And I think the other place that came out of the last discussion we had was actually PANRG. Even so, the focus of PANRG is a little bit different at the moment. That was something that we, like in my memory, had in mind, because there are a lot of open research questions here at all. So in summary, I don't want to stop you to do work in this space, but I think working on requirements in this group will not be useful use of our time. So if you want to do something, you can go to PANRG, you can go to other groups, or you can make a very concrete proposal about a very small thing you want to do, and then we can have a discussion.
Do you think PANRG will produce an internet draft which will become an RFC with requirements for what TSVWG should standardize with regard to per packet marking for diffserv? Is that the pathway you see?
Are we talking about per packet markings for diffserv here?
We're talking about per packet markings within the context of diffserv, because this is diffserv that we do. So we're saying, can we drill finer in terms of quas marking on packets?
But then,
do you think that requirement comes from PANRG?
Then make a more concrete proposal about the actual protocol part you want to standardize here.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. The option is we don't do any requirements. We go straight for a protocol.
I mean, at least make a proposal so we can talk about it.
Yeah, and I have a comment about this one. Actually, discussion started because we had a bunch of solutions proposed in this working group. And then when all of the groups came to the working group and they presented, they said, how can I select? Because I don't even know what you want to achieve. And then the working group asked us to group all those groups so that to talk together, because in the beginning, I was not working even with John. I am not even supportive of the idea he's proposing about the UDP staff and so on. So I was in another proposal. So we try to, I would say, to communicate and I would say agree on a set of requirements with the authors of various documents at the beginning, working on this, trying really and frankly not to be based in terms of the solutions, just to try a minimum set of what we want to achieve, with the hope that when we will start working on the solution, people will have a basis to, I would say, to compare what the service we are trying to achieve here. So I think, Maria, it's 2 years ago when we have the solutions, and now you are asking us to go back 2 years back in order to do the same discussion again. That's my understanding of your comment right now.
Actually, kind of, yes. So first of all, I think the most useful things about requirements documents is not publishing the requirements document. It's having the conversation, and that's what's happening right now. That's good. So I think we all learned something in this process, and we need to have this conversation. And I do hope that if you not only go back 2 years, but that the proposal you will bring up today is slightly different, because we keep having conversations about problems about these things, and we are not converging here, right? So like apparently we need to do something different.
I should probably ask the AD to come, because he was the person who requested the requirements document at the start of this process in TSVWG. So we now have to kind of let that figure. But also giving some time for him to compose his answer, because we have Spencer in queue, and we also have a pause to who's ready to give an information point. So Zahid, I suggest you wait till Spencer's spoken.
I can wait here, no problem.
Spencer, go ahead.
You asked me and you asked me to wait. That's fine.
Spencer, you're last in the queue.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to observe that Scone Pro was very recently chartered, so recently that a lot of people at the first meeting were surprised at what the charter now says. So that synchronizing based on where the Scone working group actually is, as far as its charter, makes a lot of sense, and that's not something that we could really do before, like a month ago. And I do want to back up what Med said about how we got here, and that this is kind of a combination draft that has it's merging people from several drafts previously, and I've had conversations about RC 9049, which is the PAN-RG document that Brian referred to, with some of the authors, but I've not had those conversations with all of the authors, and I'm not even sure that I've asked all the authors to look at that RFC and think about the answers. I saw that Brian had convincing answers to RFC 9049 section 4.9 in the chat. So I would just commend that to everyone, not just my fellow authors. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer.
Jahid. So yes, you're right. I asked this working group to do a couple of things, and I think the working group was actually doing that. That's great. Two reasons I wanted to have these kind of discussions. One is like we had two kind of proposals coming in, and there was like commonality on those proposals, and all those drafts starts with the requirement. So the idea was like, okay, let's put them together, try to say like what's the minimum requirement we can talk about. And this is not about publishing this draft. This is about having the discussion. That's what you got right, Lori. I mean, this is exactly the things that I wanted to see, because there's one part here which is fundamentally different than what we have been doing. DHCP is power packet treatment. And the thing that I wanted to have in this working group from the day one is some sort of consensus in this working group that we understand why we need power packet treatment. That's one thing. And do we really want to work with power packet treatment? And that's exactly where we are. So I think we did a good job on that one. So thanks for doing these things. I'm not interested right now in the publishing which got published. And I think also I agree with a couple of comments there about the security and then the solution. But that's actually exactly the point of having this discussion. Now we perhaps understand the requirements. I think the chairs would like try to say like if we understand the requirements, and then perhaps this is the time to go back to our drawing board and say like what is the solution for this power packet treatment? Envelop it within DHCP or something else, I don't know. So design the solution based on this requirement, come back to the working group saying like this is the solution, and maybe the solution will publishing. So does it make sense? I mean, because I mean, we have been discussing here for almost like 2 years now, and I want this working group to really decide whether they want to work on this power packet treatment, whatever envelope we put it on that one, and then start looking into the solution. And there we can discuss about the security things and all these things. More research can happen in path or networking things to actually support this working group work, but that we can do in parallel. That's where I am in right now. Make sense? I don't know.
Maybe makes sense. I mean, I'm unsure about how we do the work. I mean, the things, or everything that, say, Lars spoke at the mic, to pick on Lars because he doesn't mind being picked on, but anything that Lars said at the mic is something that needs an answer. It's not like this is coming out of the blue as a set of questions. It's kind of, this is a position that some people hold, and there might be some accommodation in that position if things were really clear about what exactly the threats were, what the considerations were, what the operational concerns were. I'm not so sure I have the judgment as a chair as to know how to judge a protocol unless we understand what those real concerns are relating to this particular proposal.
Yeah. I mean, this particular proposal means your requirement, or?
No, it means if we do something, okay, so I brought diffserv, something more fine-grained than diffserv, which starts to identify flows, which starts to identify something within the packet stream and let the network react to this.
Yeah.
Is that still okay within the IETF, or is that something that we now discouraged in the IETF? Because we have big privacy concerns, we have operational concerns, we have some awareness about equipment. Some of the equipment's now working in ways we couldn't do when we did RSVP, because in terms of processing we now do. So where do all these things intermix? I don't know.
So definitely we have this part that Lars was talking about, security analysis and all these things, right? Definitely we need to do that. We cannot create just a protocol right now in 2024 saying like we didn't really care about security. And I think in IETF we have the expertise to actually help us with that one, right? So it's about like rather saying like right now we are talking about the requirements. Let's say like if we actually understand those requirements, obviously there is security concerns, operations concerns, and all these things, because there's like multiple stakeholder in this solution space that all need to agree on. Let's say like we can agree on that one. And when I said like the solution thing is actually when you do all these kind of things and then basically talk about solutions. And I'm not really interested in like which document get published, but it could be a one way of getting input from others saying like, hey, we are talking about some sort of requirements. What is the security consideration? All these things. So I think that we should facilitate wherever we like. And I can talk with security ADs and others actually to bring this discussion. But I would like to know first, like what this working group thinks and what they want to do with this per packet treatment kind of things. And you chairs do and the authors do whatever that needs to be for the working group to decide on that one.
Okay, right. I have a thought. My thought on this is, I don't think we'll make progress if we start talking about the performance of a particular solution and whether we get benefits in terms of PSNI. Sorry, it'd be nice to go into this debate about whether the video is improved or not improved when we do this. I think the first thing is it feasible to expose this signaling to the path? For whatever reason, it might be beneficial, perhaps or not, perhaps. But is that something we can actually make a judgment call on before we look at a proposal? So I'm happy to see the proposal here, but I would love to know from the working group if we think there is a way of bringing insight about whether per packet marking has known problems that can be addressed, known issues that can be mitigated, or whether this is simply something that we're going to declare is too hard to work upon, too hard to provide guidance on. So, do people think there is benefit in having something above the current guidance? And if Mira wants to refine that question, please do it before I take the vote. Yeah, because I'm not doing a consensus call on a question if everybody's going to then bash up the question. I've now typed up law proceedings. So this is just on, can we ask a sensible question here? Please advise me on what that sensible question might look like.
Okay, Martin Duke, Google. So I think when John first presented this work, I was AD, and I thought I did a really bad job in handling it, because I personally felt sort of ambivalent and different about it, but I knew like there was going to be like these like hidden pools of objection that were going to come up and bite us after we've done a lot of work. And like hearing Lars and to a lesser extent Brian express that, like helped to clarify that for me. So I mean, I think that I don't want to say it's a majority of the IETF necessarily by any means, but I think I think Lars is the tip of the iceberg of people who are not in this working group, who not follow this working group, that are going to have these sorts of problems. And before, like whether I actually don't have an opinion whether or not we adopt this work, but I would really urge the proponents in the working group to try to externalize some of these discussions immediately. Either an early sector review would be a good way to do that. Consider possibly specifically rechartering to like take this work into consideration, because that is like a way to get early IETF consensus that we should be working on this problem. Like either one, I don't have a strong opinion about what we do there, but I think if we just have this discussion in TSVWG, we're going to end up having a bomb go off in during like IETF last call or ISG balloting, and that would be very sad for everybody. Thanks.
Okay. So I hear that if we're to consider work on this space, we would have to do a prerequisite that this is going to be an odd item, that we would actually push widely into the community initially and say, please shoot at us, please tell us where the concerns are, because we're trying to work on this space to understand what we might be able to do. And we frame that well in the working group, and then we push it out and we see if that bolt sinks or that bolt survives that process. If it survives, it'll be a nice shape to actually work further on. That's what I'm hearing from Martin summarizing. Is that reasonable? Good. Martin says yes. Mira, what do you think?
So I'm not here to push back on this area of work. I think we should do something. I'm working in the space. It's important. But I think the approach we're taking here is just not right. And that's what we learned. Like this is my lesson learned from the last 15 years or something. And you said, I don't know if you noticed, but you said you want to ask a question that, you know, not knowing what the benefits are, can we do something in this space? I know that you didn't say this like literally, but that's kind of what you said. And that's a wrong approach. We need to show the benefits first, and then we can decide if we want to do work. And we can only do that on a very case-by-case basis. And that's the part I don't like about this document, because it puts all the different use cases, all the different requirements, which can be very different, into one document. I don't believe that we will find like the one and only solutions to rule them all. And that's also why I think we have such a hard time about this conversation, because we try to do this big thing rather than concentrating on like the small benefits that we can actually achieve. So to answer your question, I don't think we have I don't see a good question you can ask the room here right now.
Okay, but I'm going to push back on that individually to see where we're going, just to see. If we're talking here about the trade-offs between allowing bit errors into codecs, or whether we can preferentially discard part of a codec bit stream, that's something where we might have some congestion control expertise, but really it's a video codec versus channel modeling type question. And yeah, I mean, that has to happen to have a protocol design, but then they're going to ask, can we accept the signaling to let that happen? So we have a chicken before the egg problem here. Is it okay to signal something about the metadata for the flow to the network to help it do better forwarding and preferential discard? Is, I think, the question I'm asking, rather than is there merit in doing that? And that's odd, but that's what I'm asking. Is that what you think I'm asking?
And I think you're asking it the wrong way around, right?
Okay, yeah.
So, because first of all, is there a problem? Like, are we at a problem where we need an improvement that is actually like visible for the user, and that anybody is interested in spending money on this? And when I say anybody, it's everybody who needs to be involved in the deployment, right? It has to align. And usually, in order to convince somebody about the deployment, you have to show benefits. And you can show these benefits without having a perfect signaling solution. You can show, if I have this information, I can show you the benefits. And then if we know there are benefits, we can figure out how urgently we want to develop a protocol here, like how much benefits we have. And then we can find a solution for it. And then we can do the right compromises, because there are some compromises here.
So you're, okay, if I understand right, you're advocating that the working group would choose option B, which is we progress a design and we work together on maybe several designs, maybe one for Wi-Fi, one for 3GPP, one for other areas, because there are at least 3 different parties are all asking for per packet marking or metadata in some way. And we progress all these 3 in parallel, and then we look and work out how we can find mechanisms to match them. Is that right?
So I don't know about any Wi-Fi discussion about this. I know about the 3GP discussion.
There is Wi-Fi papers and Wi-Fi discussion that hasn't occurred on the mailing list, and there's Dan had a different
I'm just saying
scenario.
I'm not involved in this in detail, so I don't know details there, but I know more about the 3GP discussion.
Yeah.
And I didn't see, and there is discussion 3GP going on this as well. They have adopted items here for the signaling, but I've never seen any kind of actually performance data and so on. And this is also because 3GP works very differently. But, you know, I think it's the wrong approach. I think we need to look at the benefits first and then do the signaling.
Okay, so that's option B, which is we spend working group time progressing each of the proposals and we see where they end up. Okay.
Brian Trammell, explosive ordnance disposal enthusiast. Seconding everything Martin said, seconding everything Miria said. The way that we're approaching sort of the same difficult conversation in Scone, like sort of like the strategy that we're using there, is look at a concrete design and iterate quickly on that, right? I think it's important to have more than us in the room as we're doing that, because people will see. I mean, like a lot of like Lars's comments were in the abstract, but they were talking about concrete things that happen, like which bits go on the wire and when they go on the wire and how have drastic differences in how much information they radiate about what's going on behind the encryption, right? And the people who can judge that, there were a lot of these people participating in Quick. Some of these people are in the room, but like there's a larger community that can give us feedback there, right? Because where we want to get is sort of the corner of the rock curve between danger and functionality. I think it's useful to get into this. I think I was thinking about sort of like my initial objection, like when I came into the mic line last time. I think this saying that the entire system, the entire engineered system that does this must be exclusively endpoint to path, right? I mean, so I don't have a concrete suggestion here. Some of the OPPD stuff is swimming around in my head. There might be a way to have negotiated consent of this that would make things easier, that would like bring those deployability concerns from the endpoints, bring that question in 9049 about can the endpoint trust the path to do the right thing with this, and like actually try to catch that head on. I do want to say, you know, we all came up and piled on this document. I do want to say thank you very much for doing this document, because it did actually frame this discussion so that we can maybe move like another 4 millimeters in the direction of making things better. But I think that, Gori, to answer your question directly, yes, I think we're getting really into this sort of this option B space where we've proven that we spin when we try to do this in the abstract. Let's try to do it concretely. And let's be very unsurprising to the rest of the IETF community about how we do that.
I'm okay with being unsurprising whichever way we go. I've taken that feedback very much to heart from the people who've spoken. I'm going to try 2 polls just for fun. And this is not really to make a decision, but to help me understand how to move forward.
Gori?
Yeah, go on, Spencer.
I was actually in queue to be part of the discussion about paths forward.
Just go for it, Spencer. Be quick and go.
Yeah. Okay. So
Angie also in queue. Go on.
So basically, from my perspective, we've been relying on RTP apps and Dash apps to fix problems in the transport, in the transport layer for a long time. We're hoping to do better in Scone. Scone might work and it might be deployed, and it makes sense to me that we look at other transport level solutions in parallel. Thank you.
Okay. Tanji, do you have a brief comment? If so, please go.
Yes, here, because I have to acknowledge this is some very useful part because as Mia mentioned, actually I involved in both IETF and 3GPP. On the 3GPP side, we discussed extensively about how to have the end host or the server, whatever, to send the per object or per packet metadata to the network part. So we have spent a lot of tremendous efforts, especially for some ciphered streams. So here, I look at this document. Actually, I did read through. This document does raise some very good points here. It's about how to handle this. The suggestion part, is, the 3GP part, we have quite a few options or solutions to address things. But I would see so far there's no like a very elegant protocol level things. Well, that I know it's going to be after the requirement document, but it's better to have the requirement document first. So suggestion from my side is to expand the section 7.1 part about the privacy, those things. Yeah, because I read it, it's just a very high level. It said, okay, that is not very important, but actually it's very critical from 3GP point of view because we spent, I don't know, I think 3 sessions, 5-day meetings to discuss that part in order to address the issue. So yeah, that is the suggestion from my side. This is a very useful document. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Okay. I am going to try 2 polls because I feel I have to get some guidance here from the working group as a whole. The first one is, does the working group think it helpful to spend time exploring the proposals for concrete designs, concrete protocols first to understand the benefits? The second poll will be a question, does the working group think it helpful to explore guidance on per packet meta information? Is that guidance itself useful to come first? On what can and cannot be used. So exploring privacy, exploring incentives, exploring potential, but not with a concrete proposal. So I'm going to ask, should we be having more talks about proposals? And I'm going to ask that one first. And I shall be intrigued to see what people think and ask the second one next. Please vote. Show hands, hum, whatever you like. I'm not taking questions while I'm voting. I'm too wise for this. I'm not even taking clarification, Mira.
It's great because I have a comment.
Yeah, not clarifications, not comments, nothing. I'm going to do 2 votes and then people can talk. And it's settling. So we say 12 people think, okay, so I should have been more clear on the vote, but obviously 12 people think yes, we should spend time exploring the proposals for concrete things. 16 people said no, presumably meaning something different. Okay, I'm going to close that and see what happens. And things might change, that's okay. Right, okay, I'm going to try the second question. And anybody who wants to talk can talk. We're running short of time, and I'm hoping that we will conclude on this topic because I think it would be useful, at least for me, to know how much agenda time we should use for this. So start. This is the other side, which says, does the working group think it helpful to explore guidance on per packet meta information? Guidance first, which may, of course, end up with nothing, which means nothing then, or guidance after we've got proposals talked about. So, yeah, do work out how you wish to spend your time. Anyone want to vote more? I will terminate. Right. Okay. The summary is in the tool. For the first one, 21 people said yes, Nope, that's the wrong one. Should the working, oh, no, I can't find it. Go ahead, Mira, I'll find it in a minute. I need a co-chair, I can't work on my own. Mira,
Okay, on the exploring guidance one,
yes,
there's 20 said yes, 11 said no, 6 no opinion.
Thank you. And the other one?
For concrete designs, 12 said yes, 17 said no, 9 no opinion.
Okay, right. Thank you, John. Then good to have somebody out there checking all this stuff.
Yeah,
Mira, go
I
ahead.
would have read it to you as well.
Yeah, I know, but it was nice to have Jonathan's input.
Perfect. So my comment on the first question, first of all, it says proposals, right? If like we have hundreds of proposals here, I would be very scared. I would rather like to take one at a time if we do something.
We have 3 proposals. We had one. We had one from Dan. We had 4.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have 4, but we have already seen presentations from Dan
yeah.
on one thing which we told him to come back and look at. One from the 3GPP community, one from
I
Wi-Fi,
understand
and maybe
there are
another.
multiple proposals, but I think this working group should look at one at a time and not at all of them. And that's actually the other point I have. I'm not sure this is the right working group for it, or we need something else.
Well, that's okay. That latter answer might be where I would go when I talk to my AD, because if clearly we're going to look at 4 proposals and look at the design space, we may be ending up at a BOF. But let me see if this working
Saying
group...
there were like many implications in your question.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm trying to work out how not to spend another hour on this today and to work out what we do concisely next. But okay, anyone else got any other comments?
I have just one comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I really support what Merton said. I think if we start doing some work on this, I think we need to expose it early in the process so that people are aware that we are doing something. And so if there is any concern or awareness, we need to be that they come to the working group and express their concern. So I think this is a good idea, Merton, you mentioned. I don't know how the process will be done, or chartering or whatever yet, but I think that increasing awareness is important here.
Okay. Right. I'm going to think. If anybody here is struggling to go and catch a plane or something, this is the only topic on our agenda. There is no more topics apart from this. And I would like to see some progress. So if we have more people commenting, that's okay. Ought I to do a... Yeah, go ahead, Tanji. Ought I to do I might do a call as to whether a guidance, so explicitly about whether this guidance document is something that we feel we have energy to work upon, and see where that fits into this. I think I will. Okay, but anyway, Tanji,
yes,
go
I
ahead.
think still on the same topic about the requirement, the document here. So thinking is like here, if we do do something on this requirement part, is there any like plan or after that to give suggestion? The things like so here we list a bunch of very good requirements here or there. And then from the TSVWG point of view, there are quite a few, some solutions. I know there are solutions. I don't want to name them. But the thing is like here, I know this is a requirement documents, but, it was as an operator, actually, we want to actionable items after that. So when you consider this one to be adopted, so actually I support to be adopted. The things like, can you also to put some like action, like a suggestion for to use this requirements document? Thank you.
This will be the world's longest question. Let's see if the thing can manage to track this as a question. explicit about this particular document, but not this particular piece of text. In other words, about this requirements document, as in, if we did go with this thing forward, do we wish to adopt work in this space to do this? It's a slight refinement, but I would love feedback. Yes, Stuart, go ahead.
Oh, I'll let you finish the count first.
I think it's finishing as we talk because it's 10:18. It's stabilized as far as I can see. I'm going to close it in just 1 minute.
Okay, I'm Stuart Cheshire from Apple, and I want to say something hopefully supportive and encouraging to the authors. This topic of selective discard has been a hot topic since I was a student, which is quite a long time ago. I remember being at the IETF meeting where DiffServ was proposed. That's a long time ago. And I was all excited because we had this internet with one size fits all, and DiffServ allowed the behavior of the network to be fine-tuned because every application is a special, unique snowflake with its own requirements that are different from every other application. And now, after a long time working in this space, I've learned that's not true. All applications want the same thing. They want high throughput, low latency, low loss. And there's very few applications that don't want those three things. I mean, I'd argue maybe none. So we can spend a lot of effort working out how to selectively discard some packets and not other packets. I think it's much more productive just to build an internet that very rarely loses packets. And this is something I see when undergraduates are taught about networking. They talk about circuit switching versus packet switching. And if they take one undergraduate class in networking, they come away, what they know is that the internet loses packets all the time, just cavalier, throwing them away whenever it feels like it. And I don't believe that's accurate. We have congestion losses because the sender exceeds the data rate. But for the network to function at all, it has to be highly reliable. I mean, maybe not the 9 nines reliability that the telephone system used to aspire to, but this is not just a chaotic losing packets all over the place. When Wi-Fi has interference, it has link layer retransmission. And I'll give one. I can see Gori making faces, so we might have to have it. But I'm expressing my opinion, and I can give one data point which is interesting. We heard from Jason Livingood this week. Comcast has been rolling out L4S. If you give feedback to the sender saying, "Hey, slow down, you're going too fast," and the sender responds, you pretty much eliminate congestion losses. And as Comcast has been rolling this out, their monitoring system sounded an alarm and put up the red flag, and they had to halt the rollout. You know what the problem was? There was no packet loss. Their monitoring system was looking for loss and retransmission, and it just went away when they did L4S, and they had to halt the rollout because clearly something was broken if there's no packet loss. We've been living with 1% packet loss on average on the internet for 30 years. Because our congestion control algorithms are designed to send 101% of the capacity, because that's how they find out that the right operating point. So obviously the excess 1% gets lost. This is not a mystery. This is not cosmic rays. This is not faulty RAM chips flipping bits. We lose 1% because we choose to lose 1%. And if we use ECN, we don't have to lose the packets to get the rate control feedback. So I'm personally spending all my effort into building an internet that doesn't lose packets, not one that has creative new ways of losing them in more complicated ways.
The funny face was just feeling like, there, knowing what to do, but wasn't a criticism of what you were saying. Sorry. Please go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think we have discussed, at least I don't remember in which document is the one that we mirrored before. It's about that, yeah, we see that, yeah, if we can have, I would say, dimension the network in order to avoid the losses with the ADL. But as you know, this is not the, there are always overloads in various segments in the network. There are always surprises, there are failures, there's a lot of stuff. And we really scope this work to be for the reactive policy management. That means that when what you have dimensioned and how you have tweaked your queues and all what you have done for your configuration to optimize to avoid the loss for those, avoid that random drops impact, I would say, the what will be perceived by the customer. So I think that, yeah, it's the, this is for me, it's really complementary. It's the same way as for L4S and so on. This is something that also we have mentioned there. There are some implications on the end-to-end signal, etc., and the impact on the RTT. There are one RTT at least that in order to react to the event itself. So yeah, I think we are not competing, I would say, with the L4S, and what we are proposing are we're not competing, and we do see value, I would say, in both of them. That's the, but yes, it is really constructive that you mentioned, Stuart, and I fully appreciate.
The bottom line is what I'm detecting right now in this room and from the poll is there is not a lot of enthusiasm for doing this. And I think it is very easy as human beings for us to imagine a scenario and then get very concerned about it. And yes, you're right. End-to-end round trip rate control algorithms can't react in less than a round trip time. So you can imagine a scenario with Wi-Fi where I walk out to the garden and suddenly the rate drops and now the packets are coming in faster than I can carry them, and it's going to take a round trip time or two to react. The question is a risk-reward analysis, which is doing an enormous amount of engineering work to solve something that actually almost hardly ever happens in practice, almost never. That's the trade-off. It's not that there isn't a problem to solve, it's that that problem is so rare. And this is, again, this is my assertion. I think a common human mistake to fall into, especially, I saw this a lot in the bellhead versus the nethead debates of the 90s. The people who came from the telephone side would talk about the Mother's Day problem. Everybody picks up the phone to call their mum on Mother's Day and the network's overloaded. And there's an assumption that the users of the network have some certain fixed requirements. And you multiply that by the number of users, and that's how much you need. And if that's more than the network has, then you have a problem and you lose the excess. In the days of phone calls, they were fixed 64 kilobits. They were not 68, they were not 62. Every phone call was exactly 64 kilobits. But when I do a Zoom call or watch a YouTube video, it's all adaptive. So there isn't a fixed network load anymore. My YouTube video quality might degrade when the network's very busy, but it's not going to continue putting in more data than the network can carry. And that is, I think, the fundamental design difference between the phone system and the internet. Is the phone system says, here's my application requirement, can the network do it? And the internet turns that completely on its head and says, here's my capacity, you make the best of sharing it between all the users. And I think that's the great strength of the internet, that it's adaptive. But this idea that we have busy times when the network's overloaded, that's how the phone system used to be. With adaptive video, overload means people are getting lower quality. It doesn't mean that the demand goes up. It means as the demand goes up, the per flow share goes down, and it's an equilibrium.
We had a couple of people try to join the debate and then left. Does anybody else want to make something here? Because this is motivating a discussion on the mailing list, and that is where I propose we continue this rather than in presentations and in plenary, where each person says something in turn. We need to use the mailing list, and we probably need to do something different to what we're doing to make progress. But Lars, if you wish to say something extra,
as
please
you started
do.
speaking, I thought you wanted more people at the mic, and I was one of the people who dropped in and out.
Yeah. Well, I kind of do want more people, but I also just want this to finish on the mailing list because I don't think we gain anything as a result from this discussion.
Stuart's point, which was very well said, triggered something. I mean, because you talked for L4S, right? And the nice thing with having a lower latency, which is what you're getting with L4S, is also that you don't need to drop the optimal packets anymore. You can just drop random because the sender now has a much bigger window to resend from the end.
Okay.
Right? Because the congestion control loop is so much faster that for a video, the play out time is not, going to be affected. If you can afford to actually drop willy-nilly and the sender will still be able to recover.
So lower latency is shorter control loop, which lets us be more responsive. That's an interesting bit in the whole piece, and it is important. Go on.
Yeah, right. Rüdiger Geib, Deutsche Telekom. I'd also support Stuart's point. I'd like to understand what's in the bag before we start working on mechanisms. What is the benefit? Can we have a simple design which is worth all that effort we put into it and see that there is a true benefit with an implementation in a scenario which is not the 1st May, or in Germany it's Christmas or New Year's Eve. Do not engineer for 100% of the cases, engineer the network for 99%. That's good enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments?
Yeah, I think this is reasonable comments we are hearing. The question is the next step. Is there interest to continue discussion, and how we can frame the discussions, and how we can capture, I would say, the sense of the work, what the working group wants us to do. So this is more, I would say, on the chairs to tell us whether we continue putting some energy on this, or should we just, I would say, go away or work on something else.
Well, I'm not going to say anything. What I'm going to say is please use the mailing list in the days after this meeting. As people think about this, please ask what you think are the important things, make the important assertions you believe that haven't been said as editors, because sometimes the conversation goes in particular directions, and let's see if the mailing list reveals something. In the meantime, the two chairs will talk to the AD about whether we would welcome or not welcome a presentation at the next meeting, whether this topic is something that we have particular suggestions about how to take forward. But I have no advice for you currently. You've seen what the working group says, and we will heed what the working group says. We can't continue to work on a thing where we don't have support from a good progress. So that's my summary.
Thank you.
Mira wants a final say. Is it going to be nice? Good.
One thing I would be really interested in would be to see more data. I'm not sure if it's here or in a research group or whatever, but whenever losses in mobile networks are slightly more complicated than in fixed networks, but there might also be solutions. But whenever I looked at losses in mobile networks, I didn't have like a comprehensive answer what's actually going on or not or whatever. So if people have more data, I would be interested in that.
Mira would like more data. Well, we can use the mailing list to get going on this as well. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for helping to try and form some thoughts around this subject. Really value all your inputs. And please continue to read the drafts. Hopefully, we'll see you at the next meeting. Please use the mailing list in between. Have a safe journey home and enjoy the rest of the IETF until then.